The latest in the world of politics, tensions between the world's largest economy and the world's largest exporter, well, it's only getting worse. This following President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs on over 80 countries last week, including that combined total 104% levy on China. Meanwhile, stocks in Europe and Asia mostly lower after the tariffs hit, with several $1 trillion in the market value of U.S. stocks erased in the weeks since Trump announced the tariffs. Joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Mr. Armin Kurdigan, U.S. Navy captain retired and political strategist back here on the Live Zone. Always good to see you, Armin.
Happy Wednesday, guy. Happy hump day.
All right, well, let's dump away. In this case, we're going to talk about these tariffs. And wow, boy, do we have a lot to talk about. The back and forth between the U.S. and China. Now, earlier today, Armin, we know that China was slapped with a 104% tariff. That happened at 12:01 a.m. They then clapped back, if you will, and announced an 84% tariff of their own against the U.S. I got to ask you, Armin, what's going on here?
Beyond a certain point, when you raise tariffs, it doesn't really matter anymore. So, because it's unaffordable to buy the goods, whether it's a, say, for example, a 50% tariff or a 500% tariff, you're not going to be able to import. China does stand to lose a lot more than the United States in terms of where they are, because their exports account for about 3% or so of their GDP to the United States alone. They export to other countries as well. So we'll see how they can actually possibly impact. But this is a serious problem for them. And frankly, China has done a lot of cheating. They are probably the greatest threat to American trade and probably the greatest offender in terms of trade. So there's a lot to work there. It's a lot of the other countries that I'm a lot more concerned about.
Yeah, it's a lot of tit for tat and going back and forth. Yet again, something that has become something of the norm. Speaking of that, the EU now backed its first countermeasures against tariffs imposed by, obviously, the U.S. Officials have not said exactly what those measures entail. However, we are expecting to hear what they are very soon. What do you think we're gonna get a first, let's say, notice of?
The United States exports a lot of agricultural food products to Europe. We also export a lot of energy. I don't believe that the European Union is going to put tariffs on the importation of energy, especially things like liquid natural gas or other measures, which basically liberate them from the East, from being reliant on natural gas supplies from Russia. So I think they will be a little bit more targeted because the EU is not stupid. But at the same time, we do export a lot to the EU. Remember, the United Kingdom is not part of the EU, and right now the reciprocal tariffs back and forth between the U.S. and the UK is only 10%. According to at least the way Donald Trump has put it, the UK has not been a big offender. So we may still be able to do a lot of exportation to the UK, but not the EU. But at the same time, while there are going to be a lot more reciprocal tariffs, I do believe the European Union is going to come to the table much faster than some countries like China or possibly India might.
All right, Armin. Well, I hate to bring it up, but we're going to have to talk about that dreaded R word. In this case, it happens to be a recession. The CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase now stating that a recession is a likely outcome as a result of the trade war resulting from President Trump's tariff policies. Do you agree?
It's possible, certainly, because tariffs do tend to slow economies down. It is essentially a tax hike on the economies, and taxes aren't necessarily recessive when it comes to economic growth. In the old days, you might have used a tax hike to actually slow an economy down. Nowadays, we use interest rate hikes, which I'm not necessarily sold that that's the best way to do things. But at the same time, if the economy tends to slow down, I think you'll see the Fed start to cut rates as well and bring those rates back down, which will have more of a mitigating impact on the recession. I don't believe that we'll go into a recession if this tariff war ends within, say, a couple of months, 90 days at the max. If it goes beyond that, then it gets harder and harder to recover. The longer you're in this trade war with these tariffs, it's progressively much longer to actually recover, because you can't just turn them on and off, because jobs may have been lost, plants may have been shuttered. So the shutdown happens a lot faster than the ramp up, so to speak.
Yeah, gosh, yet again, all eyes happen to be on what's going to happen with regard to all of that. Speaking of this, I want to make mention that with the tariffs that are currently in place, a lot of folks don't understand, but, well, several things have been excluded, if you will, up until this point at least, and that's steel, aluminum in autos, copper in lumber, plus pharmaceuticals, semiconductors. I could go on and on. Critical minerals could be next. That's what is actually possible to happen if the president decides to move forward. Do you think that he'll actually go that far?
Now, let's take it a step back from there. I think to put everything into context, what Trump has done, he's basically announced a trade war against the entire world. And in a lot of ways, perhaps it's warranted. In other ways, it isn't. I think in order to accomplish what he wants, you might have been a little bit more sensible to be a little bit more targeted, as you say, not taxing certain materials and also going after certain offender nations and not others. And perhaps say maybe we work closely with Canada or perhaps a couple of other allies to strengthen our trade relationships with them while at the same time, imposing tariffs on other nations. So right now, what he's put himself into a box in is perhaps that can the United States withstand an economic retaliation from the entire world? And the idea that a lot of these raw materials and semiconductors are exempt from some of these tariffs, I think is a sign that at the very least he knows that we can't simply cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. So uh, a lot of those raw materials, we are the world's largest consumer. We are the world's largest user of things. And if we don't have a supply chain, at the very least, the raw materials to make those things, then the impact to the U.S. economy is going to be commensurately greater than it would be the impact to the rest of the world.
Yeah, Armin, I think we can all argue that a lot of folks will just turn the other way. They would act as if tariffs, well, it's not necessarily a thing until it hits them in the pocket. That happens to now be the case for TikTok and YouTube star, none other than Mr. Beast. If you're a fan of YouTube or TikTok, you pretty much know who I'm talking about. In this case, he currently sells chocolates and says, ironically, because of all the new tariffs, well, it's now way cheaper to make chocolate bars outside of America. In this case, he added this could be the nail in the coffin for small business. What do you think when someone of that caliber says something like that?
Well, honestly, I'd never heard of Mr. Beast until about an hour and a half ago, so to speak. But what he talks about is essentially endemic of the idea of the economic ties that have basically occurred over the last 30, 40, 50 years with globalism and how we're much more inextricably connected to the economies of the rest of the world. So it's entirely possible that based on what his business model is, that it may be a lot more expensive to build this and make the chocolate overseas. Of course, at the same time, we've also heard a lot about fair trade. We've heard a lot about child labor in Africa when it comes to the cocoa trade. It's a hidden, dirty little secret akin to perhaps the sweatshops where Nike was making sneakers in other parts of the world. So I think perhaps in some ways maybe it could draw attention to some of these places where products and manufacturing and this cultivating is incredibly cheap for the very reason that perhaps people are being exploited in these parts of the world, or they're working in areas where they're making $3, $4, maybe $5 a day to work in a manufacturing shop to make jeans and shoes and T-shirts for American citizens. So hopefully, if he's got some really good chocolate, because I'm a big chocolate lover, that it won't impact his business too much, and I don't want his livelihood to be lost. But at the same time, perhaps some of these other issues could come to light.
All right, we'll get more on tariffs from a financial expert in a couple of minutes. However, I want to switch gears, if you will, and talk about the budget resolution. Now, obviously, President Trump now telling Republicans it is more important now than ever to pass a budget resolution. Armin, they're going to get it done?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I think some of the spending cuts aren't sufficient for some Republicans and perhaps too much for others. The bottom line when it comes to the budget deficit, despite everything that Doge is doing to find tens of billions of dollars of unnecessary wasteful spending, which to you and me is an unimaginable amount of money. When it comes to the federal budget, it's a very small part. But frankly, you're not going to be able to balance the federal budget unless you tackle entitlement spending. And it's too toxic to even talk about it because once you start doing it, the other side or even people on your own side are going to go after you for no other reason than political purposes. And what's going to happen in 8 or 9 years, Social Security is going to run out of money, Medicare and Medicaid are going to run out of money, and we're going to be in a real hurt locker. Until that mandatory spending gets under control and until we bring interest rates back down, no legislation is going to have a really tangible impact on deficit reduction and bringing our debt down, eventually paying it all down. So it's it's almost as if a lot of what's being discussed right now has a lot of high profile, but is inside the noise of what the real insidious and serious problem is.
Yeah. All right. We'll end with this, and that is 31 U.S. senators now demanding the return of a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Among them, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen. Now, we know that man was sent to a notorious Supermax prison. The deportation occurred after ICE agents apprehended him while he was leaving work in Baltimore. We also know that he is a special needs child. What's going to happen with this? Will he eventually return to the U.S. in your mind?
It's possible that he might, due to the press attention that has been given to this. When you look at the massive amount of criminals, illegal immigrant criminals who are in this country, gang-related folks who have violated their parole and all those other things that we're trying to get out of the country, it is very possible in an imperfect system that perhaps a few people may be deported who weren't supposed to be deported. Now, a lot of the details on this guy's background are still perhaps unclear, unsure as to whether he should have been deported or he should not have been deported. And speaking with El Salvador, I don't necessarily know why El Salvador may not want to return him if this was legitimately given over. I would venture to guess that this may actually happen again. But overall, what we've seen is that over the last 5, 10, 15 years, the massive influx of individuals in this country who shouldn't be here is beyond calculation. And the problem needs to be solved. Unfortunately, there might be some casualties. So really, frankly, if you want to blame somebody for what's happening right now, you can look at the last 4 years and put some blame there.
Well, it's no secret a lot of people are also pointing the finger at current President Trump with regard to why this is taking place. Armand Kurdigan, political strategist, joining us yet again right here on the Live Zone. Always good to see you, sir.
Have a great day, Guy.
All right. Well, speaking of the president, we now know that he is not only doubling down, but tripling down when it comes to his economic strategy, with word that he will increase tariffs and, well, he will continue to do so over the next several days if he has his way. Joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Mr. John Iannucci from ILG Private Wealth. Welcome to the Fox 5 Live Zone. John, good to see you, sir.
Guy, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so let's jump right into this. I got to tell you, we have been following Wall Street for the past several days now. It has been somewhat of a roller coaster ride. A lot of folks really jittery, if you will, especially investors.
Certainly.
So the million-dollar question, or shall I say the trillion-dollar question is, should folks take a deep breath and just relax?
Absolutely. Our advice to our clients is that the word for the day is caution and patience. President Trump has essentially put the world on notice that the United States is not going to accept decades-long unfair trade practices. That notice has essentially created uncertainty within the market, and the way the market responds to uncertainty is with volatility. And so our advice to our clients is keep a close eye, but patience is the word for the day.
So I wish I had a crystal ball in front of me, and I'm pretty sure you would as well. We'd probably be a lot richer. With that being
Right.
said, I guess the next question would really be the tariff strategy. Is that the right direction to go in?
Look, I think that President Trump has decided that the United States has been basically subjected to unfair trade practices that has put us at a significant disadvantage for decades. I think that his strategy will ultimately work out for the United States, but I think it's going to be a bumpy road. I think we're going to see a significant amount of volatility in the market. I think we're going to see supply chain issues for a number of months, but ultimately I think his strategy will work for the benefit of the United States.
All right, John, I have to tell you something, and that is I think I have an addiction, and that is I look at social media a lot. But not only that, I also follow my 401k, and I got to tell you, it is now melting away. Folks like me that happen to be in that position, should we really be concerned?
Look, I would never suggest to you not to be concerned. You should keep a close eye on your 401k, but don't let emotions rule the day. Don't let emotional investing make you decide to liquidate your investments. You know, history has taught us that if you're out of the market for 10 specific days after this kind of a pullback, you lose the opportunity not only to earn back what you've lost, but to earn substantially more. Hold the day, keep a close eye, but hold the plan.
All right, we'll end with this, John, and that is, how long, sir? How long will we have to deal with this pain?
Great question. I will tell you that most analysts that I'm following today think that this will probably resolve by June or July of this year. Look, there are a number of countries that have already come to the table and want to negotiate a revised trade agreement. So I think we're going to see some bumps. We're going to see a lot of volatility, but June, July, I think this is going to straighten out and we'll be back. This economy is still robust, it's still strong, and we'll be fighting back, but it's going to be a few months.
All right, that's what I call very optimistic. Yet again, we have been speaking with Mr. John Iannucci from ILG Private Wealth, joining us right here on the Live Zone. Truly appreciate your time, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right.